Let's start it. Dear colleagues, I'll start the meeting, yes, today's webinar. It's my pleasure to welcome today's speaker, Giles Brandon, who is the most experienced person that I know of in the topic of grant writing. And today he agreed to give us some inside information and his own experience on how to prepare winning projects for the very competitive proposal call twinning for the next year. So please, Giles, floor is yours, and yeah, and hope for other people you will enjoy the meetings. Maybe some info before slides will be available for you, and also the recording will be available for your further reference. So, Giles, yes, please.
That's really, thank you very much. Thank you for that introduction. Um, yes, firstly, good afternoon to all of you in Lviv or wherever you are. I hope this presentation I'm going to make will be of some benefit to you. Um, so this whole presentation, I'm doing it within the context of the HELIOS project, which I'm sure many of you are already aware of. HELIOS is actually a twinning project which is being led by Lviv Polytechnic National University by Professor Irina Yaremchuk. You see the other partners that are involved in the project. They're at the top of this slide. And in fact, within the Helios project, um, some of the activities are about giving training for proposal writing and project management. And I'm sure many of you who are here today, you already attended my online training sessions I had earlier this year about project management for Horizon Europe. Okay, so for this afternoon, I'm going to be talking about the latest Horizon Europe twinning call, which will be published very soon and will have a deadline in early April. Now, the way I've structured this training is in two parts. Part one, which you see here, is going to be a sort of summary of what the call is about, what the call text from the European Commission is about, and hopefully try to make that a little bit more easier to understand and accessible. And then in part two of my training, I'm going to go into details about how to try to write a competitive proposal for this call. Now, at the end of each part, there'll be a question and answer session. So don't be afraid to, if you've got any questions, write them in the chat. I think Nazari will somehow collect those and then maybe feed them to me at the appropriate question and answer session. Okay, so let me get my, here we go. So the agenda for this part one, what is the Horizon Europe 2026 call all about? I'll start by giving a few example twinning projects. Then I'll talk about the context of twinning within Horizon Europe. I'll say some words about the core basics, budget and strategic objectives, some words about what the Commission expects in terms of consortium, widening countries and scientific scope. I'll move on to talk about what the Commission expects in terms of capacity building, mobility and inclusiveness activities. Likewise, I'll talk about what the Commission hopes to see in terms of impacts, synergies, and how they'll do the evaluation. And then lastly, we'll have a sort of Q&A session, question and answer session about this part one.
Маємо це потрібно записати Айстра, Ліса.
Sorry. So let's start with some example twinning projects. Now, I have to say, over the course of Horizon Europe, which started in 2021, there have been literally hundreds and hundreds of twinning projects funded by the European Commission. Here, I'm just highlighting two that I know of because they were ones where I helped to write the proposal and I've been involved in the running of the projects. I mean, the subject matter therein is purely coincidental. With twinnings, it can be any field of science and technology. But look, with these two that I'm flagging, the first one on the left, this was one in the University of Tirana in Albania. and their project actually finishes in February of next year. They've been running for nearly 3.5 years. And the project has given them a chance to work on a research project in developing sustainable nanosensors for detecting water pollution. And they've also done field trials and field tests in rivers and lakes around Albania. In their twinning project, they've got partners from Spain, ICN2, and also a very good university in the Czech Republic, Palatsky University. Now, in some ways, I'm quite proud of this project because when I wrote this way back in sort of 2021, and we started the project in 2022, it was one of the first ever twinning projects in Albania. So that's one on the left. The one on the right, Twisma, this is a twinning project again, also which is coming to an end, sadly, at the end of this month. But this is one that I wrote with the Institute for Scintillation Materials in Kharkiv in Ukraine. Um, so with their twinning project, this institute has partnered with CERN in Geneva, Switzerland, and with a very good CNRS institute in Lyon. And together they've been developing new types of advanced scintillating materials, which get used for particle detection systems, or what they call calorimeters, for high energy physics. Now, these are just two. I said there's literally been hundreds. The three QR codes you see on the right, if you go to those later on, you'll be able to see for yourselves. Those QR codes will direct you to what's called the Cordis project database. It's a database from the European Commission where there's basic details about all these different twinning projects. You can find details about who the coordinator is, who the partners are, a short abstract about the project, what their budgets are, and so forth. So I strongly recommend if you are interested in this call, it's worthwhile doing your homework and investigating how others have done it. So moving on, some words, some context about the twinning course. So um, on the right, you see like part of the front cover of the work program 2026 to 2027 for the Widening program. In fact, that QR code in the top right-hand corner, that will take you directly to the PDF file containing that. Now, this work program, Horizon Europe Widening, um, its its main aim is about, well, Widening program is all about widening participation and strengthening the European research area. So its objective is about closing research and innovation gaps across the EU. But in fact, it's not only the EU, because as you see, Ukraine and there are other countries outside the EU, Armenia, Georgia, Albania, to name just a few, who are also eligible, who are also widening countries and able to access this scheme. So the twinning is a call within the widening program. I encourage you to go and have a look at the work program to see about other calls, things like ERA Chair, teaming, um, European Excellence Initiative. There's a whole other series of calls that may be of interest for yourselves. So some basic facts about the twinning call. The Let me just shift that bit over. Um, so the twinning call has this specific identifier. It's Horizon Wide Era 2026-02 Widening -01. I don't expect you obviously to remember that, except when you do come to register for the call, that is the identifier that you will need to look for. Now, this twinning call, the type of action, the Commission call it a coordination support action, or CSA for short. And the funding model is what they call a lump sum funding model, which I'll talk about later in my presentation. Now, the call officially opens on the 8th of January. What this means is on the 8th of January, you'll be able to go onto the European Commission's portal and find the official details there and also register to participate and submit a proposal. The call deadline is the 9th of April, so it's just under 4 months away from now. And if you apply for a twinning project, the duration typically is 3 years. And as already mentioned before, it's what they call a bottom-up call, which means it's open to any fields of science and technology, provided it's state of the art or beyond state of the art. Budget and expected contribution. What's called the indicative EU contribution per project. In other words, the amount of grant funding you can apply for a project, a twinning project, is anywhere between 800,000 and 1.5 million euros. Different budget requests are not excluded if well justified. So you could potentially ask for slightly less than 800,000 or more than 1.5. But honestly, if you're my very honest opinion, I wouldn't bother. I mean, all the twinning projects that I've written and won, we always basically had a budget of 1.5 million euros. The total indicative budget for this call, for this topic, is 264.5 million euros, which means that the Commission is expecting to fund something like 210 projects from this call. This twinning call is the last one under Horizon Europe, and it's by far the largest. So it's sort of, at least under Horizon Europe, it's your best opportunity and your last opportunity to try to get a twinning project. The strategic objective of twinning, well, it's kind of follows on from what's already been said about what the Widening program is. It's about enhancing networking between research institutions in widening countries and leading EU institutions. It's about raising research excellence and innovation capacity in a defined area. It's about strengthening research management capacity of the coordinating institution. What are the expected outcomes? This again follows on from the previous slide. So it's about improving research excellence and capacities in widening countries. It's about reducing research and innovation gaps across the EU and just outside of the EU. It's about enhancing strategic collaboration with at least two leading institutions from different member states of the EU. /AC, this stands for associated countries. So these are countries such as Ukraine, Armenia, Georgia, and various others, where those countries are associated to Horizon Europe. Other expected outcomes include raised reputation and attractiveness of the coordinating institution, improve research profile of staff, in brackets including mobility and skills, and yes, strengthening research management capacities and structures. So some words about the composition of the consortium. So the Commission expects that the coordinating institution must be a public research institute or a university in a widening country. So obviously Lviv Polytechnic National University qualifies there. And they expect in your consortium that there'll be at least two internationally leading partners from two different member states or associated countries. Then additionally and optionally, you can have other partners who are maybe specialized in giving training or dissemination and communication, knowledge valorization, intellectual property rights, etc. If that is very relevant to your proposal and to your consortium. This is a list of widening countries. So I'm not going to read them all out, but in the EU, you have predominantly in sort of Central and Eastern Europe, but also, for example, Portugal and Greece appear in that list. And then, yes, you have countries that are associated to Horizon Europe. There's Ukraine, but there's also these various other countries, some of which I've already mentioned. Some words about what the European Commission expects in terms of scope and scientific strategy. So they expect in your proposal that you will clearly define the area of research and innovation that's targeted by the Twinning project. And they expect that you'll demonstrate the scientific excellence of all the partners in the chosen area. They also expect that you can explain how the twinning will take the research and innovation to a new level, in other words, in brackets, beyond state of the art. Some words about the activities that are funded. So networking and capacity building. The types of activities you can get funding in the Twinning project include short-term staff exchanges and expert visits, both inward and outward mobility. In other words, going from Ukraine into the EU and vice versa. Short-term on-site or virtual trainings, workshops, and joint summer schools, conference attendance and organization of joint events, dissemination and outreach activities to raise visibility. Some words about gender equality and inclusiveness. These bullet points sort of summarizing the perspective from the European Commission. So in your proposal, they want to see that activities align with the gender equality plans of the participating institutions where they are applicable. They expect to see promotion of increased gender equality and inclusiveness in all project activities. They expect that there will be tracking and reporting on the participation of female scientists and underrepresented groups during the course of your project. Some words now about the research management capacity building. So within a twinning project such as Helios, it's not the main activity, clearly, of the twinning project, but nevertheless, it's still an important activity, that there are trainings and tasks that will help to strengthen the research administration of your university. Now, here the Commission is saying that they expect to see either a dedicated work package or tasks allocated to strengthening research management in the coordinating institution. And they advise that you use what's called, as a reference, to use what's called the Research Management Roadmap, which I believe is published by a European association called EARMA, EARMA, and or that you look at something called the European Competence Framework for Research Managers. So these two frameworks, roadmaps, they can give you ideas about what sort of tasks, what sort of activities can be done to boost research management capacity in your organization. And the last bullet point says, aim to establish or upgrade a dedicated research management support team. So yes, so in your proposal, in this dedicated work package, make sure you make it very clear who are going to be the beneficiaries in your university for these activities. Now, some words about what the Commission is calling the research and innovation component. So we've already said a moment ago that your twinning proposal has to be focused on a particular field of science, particular technology. And obviously with the Helios project, that focus has been all about white emitting organic lighting systems. Now, as part of this sort of focus for your twinning project, the Commission say that you can actually do a research project together with your EU partners. And they're saying that, look, they call it the research and innovation component. That's their words for this sort of research project. They're saying that you have to have a dedicated work package, a work package one just for that. Well, they say it's optional, but believe you me, it's described as optional in the work program, but I'd say it's obligatory. I don't think you'll have much chance of winning a project unless you have this. So anyway, let's assume you have this in your proposal, this work package one. The budget you allocate for it must not exceed 30% of the total Horizon Europe grant. So if you're going for an overall budget of sort of 1.5 million euros, what does that mean? It means that for this work package one, probably your budget is of the order of about 450,000 euros. So this work package one has to be called research component, no more than 30% of the overall budget allocated to it. And then in addition, the Commissioner is saying at least 50% of this component's budget must be allocated to the coordinator. So working it back, if let's assume you've got something like 450,000 allocated for this, then at least 225,000 must be for the coordinator, Lviv Polytechnic National University. What can you do in this research project? Well, it could be things like development and implementation of new ideas, methods, or technologies. Of course, it all depends on what field of science and technology you're working in. Some more words about these activities in this work package one. So the activities must advance the state of the art in the chosen field. All training directly related to the advanced research and innovation should be budgeted here. And this component should be used to build a strong scientific foundation for long-term collaboration. So somehow in your proposal, not only do you need to sort of describe how you're going to do this work package one, this research and innovation component with your partners, but you'll be needing to describe how this is a sort of stepping stone to longer term collaboration with them and other research activities. Some words about expected impact and indicators, which is a feature of all Horizon Europe proposals. So the Commission is saying they want to see quantitative and qualitative indicators at institutional level and possibly also regional/national level. Um, Examples of such indicators might be things like publications, citations, peer recognition, collaboration agreements with non-academic sector. Other indicators might be things like private investment attracted, intellectual property created, in other words, patents, um, innovative products, services, attraction of international students. These are all just some examples. Um, Mobility and human capital development. So, in a way, this has already been mentioned, but and by its name, twinning, these projects involve increased mobility inwards and outwards of qualified scientists and young researchers. Importantly, they provide very valuable opportunities for doctoral candidates and early career researchers. These projects also provide access to new research avenues and creative approaches through leading institutions. Now, briefly, some words about policy background for this call and indeed for much of the widening program. So this is probably not the most exciting thing to sort of talk about to scientists, but it's important to sort of be aware of the policy documents that have somehow influenced the establishment of the widening program and or the the, the nature of some of the particular widening calls. Now, in the context of twinning, there's three that you should be aware of. The first is what's called the second era policy agenda from 2025 to 2027. This is a 3-year roadmap for enhancing Europe's research and innovation ecosystem. The QR code to the right, that will take you to a web page where you can find out more. Another important policy document, 2024 to 2029 political guidelines, which cover everything from defense and security to sustainable prosperity, democracy, and social fairness. This is an important background document. And then thirdly, what's called the competitiveness compass. This is the Europeans' roadmap for restoring Europe's dynamism and boosting economic growth. So look, all those three QR codes, they'll take you to the relevant websites where you can find out more. I say not the most exciting thing for most scientists, but this will be very important when you come to write your impact section in your part B of your proposal. It'll be there where you will need to make some important references to these kinds of policy documents and how your project is helping to implement them. The Commission also mentioned in the call text for twinning that they, in essence, welcome if your twinning proposal is somehow synergistic, complementary with other funding programs. So who knows, maybe your university has or will have projects funded under EU cohesion policy funds. I'm not so familiar with Ukraine, but maybe your country has what are called smart specialization strategies, in which case it's good to be able to demonstrate how your twinning project aligns with those. Then, of course, there are things like national, regional, economic and research programs. It's good to show how your projects align with them. Fourthly, maybe there's specific private sector investment going on in Lviv, and somehow you can relate your twinning project to those. Moving on, some words about the evaluation and ranking of these twinning proposals. So all proposals will be evaluated by at least 4 expert evaluators, and they're evaluated against these 3 criteria. Excellence, which is the scientific quality of the project. Impact, which is the contribution to expected outcomes. And thirdly, quality and efficiency of implementation, which is the management, work plan, and resources. Now, each of those criteria is scored out of 5. And so you've got 4 expert evaluators. What the Commission does is they take the median, not the mean, but the median of the scores from those evaluators. They take them for each of the criteria. And then the overall score, which is out of 15, is the sum of the 3 median scores. There's this last bullet point here. It says ex-AQO proposals prioritized first by geographical diversity of coordinators among widening countries. Okay, to try to explain that in more simple language, what the Commission are basically saying is, if there are 2 proposals which have exactly the same score, exactly the same excellence score, impact, quality score, yes, then what the Commission will do is they'll favour the proposal which is from a country which has less widening projects. Okay, because the idea, the Commission want as much as possible that these twinning projects are spread out across the EU and across associated countries. They don't want to have an excess concentration in one particular country. They want to do as much as possible to ensure a good spread. So this last slide about the call. So some key messages for applicants. So it's going to be really important to build a strong complementary consortium centered on a widening country coordinator. It's going to be vital to present a clear strategy for excellence, capacity building and management strengthening. It's going to be vital to design a coherent set of networking and research and innovation activities which have measurable impacts. And it's going to be vital to align with Horizon Europe rules, lump sum budget logic, and twinning specific conditions. So, dear colleagues, that was a rather, believe it or not, a relatively quick step through about the call text from the Commission. I don't know if at this point, do any of you have any questions about the call text that you'd perhaps like to ask me?
I think there's a couple of questions regarding yes, Alexander Barasco, I will finish. Yes, so yeah, Alexander, please.
Thanks so much for the presentation, which is very interesting. I have one question, which is technical one. Probably I can learn it from the program, but still probably you already can advise me. Is there a limitation how many applications can be submitted from one coordinator?
In theory, no. I mean, when you say coordinator, are you talking about a person, a professor, or are you talking about an institution?
Institution, New Polytechnic, for instance, right?
Oh, no limit at all. But okay, that's the official position. And if I think back to the last twinning call in 2023, I certainly knew of 1 or 2 institutions where maybe they won 3 twinnings. So, for example, ELTE University in Budapest in Hungary, they managed to win 3. And I think I heard of, was it Tallinn University in Estonia? I think they managed to also win 3. There may have been even some universities out there that got more, but 3 seem to be kind of an upper limit. With that all said, unofficially, I know the Commission's not too keen to see just like, hundreds from the same university or the same research institution, because they prefer to see that there's been some kind of strategic approach, some prioritization perhaps of the research topics that people are applying to. Now, what that magic number is, I don't know. Yeah. But why couldn't Lviv also try and win three? If you don't try, you'll never succeed. Yeah.
Thanks.
Also, another question is when registering, some was asking how to attract partners, international partners, to join twinning projects and ensure effective communication. So probably it's referring to be a coordinator, have to attract someone who will actually help you to win the proposal.
Well, it's a bit, is that the right expression, chicken or egg? To be honest, to be really, really honest, it's best if you have at least one or two of those contacts already. The reason why I say that is in your twinning proposal, whoever your advanced partners are, these partners from EU, it's vital that you show that you have already some sort of relationship with them, that you or maybe you've already written a research paper with them in the recent past, a few years ago. Or maybe you've met at certain international conferences. But it's really vital. I'm talking, I don't know, the thing with this twinning and all the advice, I can give you sort of kind of advice, but it's sort of like an 80 or 90, 80-20, 90-10 rule. So I can give some advice, and there'll always be some exceptions to the contrary of what I've said. But in general, what I've seen is I've seen plenty of proposals where evaluators said, these guys don't know each other. They're going to waste how much time just getting to know each other, and they're going to lose time in the project. So that's why my general advice is you need to be able to demonstrate you have some relationship with them, but not so much that the point of having the twinning project is redundant. Yeah, somehow the twinning is going to have to take this relationship to another level. Yeah. So
Okay, thank you. Maybe thank you. Yeah, Alexander, you have more question?
Thanks so much. Just one more question. Actually, it's related to the consortium composition, let's say, right? So, as you mentioned, so there should be a relationship with at least two, let's say, advanced players, advanced entities in the European Union. What is a healthy number of partners to
well,
have?
well, well. My honest advice, my general advice would be stick to two unless you've got a very, very good reason to go with more. Um, Simply because the more partners you have, the more headache you're going to have with the administration. Yeah. But it really, really depends. I mean, sometimes with research projects, especially there's some kind of technology involved, the way you sort of divide up this project, there may be like a theory part. I mean, if I think a bit about, for example, Helios, you've usually got some kind of theoretical part, then there's some chemical synthesis, and then there's like maybe producing some kind of prototype. And they maybe require different skills, and therefore you go, yes, we need three advanced partners or whatever. But failing that, I would say try to keep it simple. And it's not a negative if you only come with two, yeah. Um, you're not going to get more points by having more partners. Yeah. So that's my general advice.
Okay, thank you. Uh, any other questions, colleagues? Uh, if not, you can write it into the chat. We can return it at the end, and probably we'll need to continue. Go to.
Okay. So, right, so I warn you, dear colleagues, this part two is longer. Um, Part two is about how to write a competitive twinning proposal. So this is broadly speaking the agenda for this part. So I'm going to start off by saying some words about some essential documents. I'll then talk about, in general terms, how to go about structuring a twinning network. I'll then say about how to structure the overall proposal, what I'm calling the Excellence Implementation Impact Framework. I'm then going to move on to talk about the Part B of the proposal. So the Part B, for those of you who don't know, this is the technical part of the proposal. It's something like 33 pages long. This is the hardest part to prepare. This is where you're going to have to do a whole load of writing together with your partners. Now that Part B is divided into three sections: excellence, implementation impacts. I'll explain a bit later why I've put them in the funny order, 1, 3, 2. We'll then move on to talk about the Part A, which is the online part of the application where you have to fill in administrative data and your budget. I'll then say some words about other sources of information that you should go away and have a look at to find out more about this twinning call. And then lastly, I'm going to say some words about an internal competition that we're going to have within Helios together with yourselves, where we are going to select a number of you and give you hands-on support to help prepare your twinning proposals. So let's start with essential documents. So the one on the left, in fact, I've already mentioned earlier in the slide, this is the Widening work program. The Commission just released the official version about 4 days ago. The QR code will take you direct to the PDF where you can download that. I then have in the middle and on the right these two other documents. Now, I deliberately not put QR codes for these because you and we need to wait until the call is officially open on the 8th of January. Once that's opened and we can register for the call, then we can download the definitive forms. So the one in the middle is a standard application form. You can see at the bottom it says version 11, 16th of December 2024. Maybe there's going to be a version 12 come the 8th of January. I don't know. But whether we do or don't, we need to wait until the 8th of January for that. But that document, as it says, it's a whole guide, gives you a whole lot of information about how to fill in the Part A, but also about the Part B. And then the one on the right, this is the lump sum Excel budget tool that the Commission has. This is an Excel file that you will need to use to put in your budget for your proposal. And again, I'm not giving you a QR code because you need to make sure you download the official one from the Commission's portal once the call has been opened. You can also find out information about the twinning call. At the bottom, there's a QR code that takes you to another particular page. So now let's move on to ask this question about how to structure a twinning network. So in essence, you were sort of saying who will be the advanced partners in your twinning network who are going to help to boost the research and innovation capacity of your organization in your chosen state-of-the-art research topic. So look, this sort of figure here, this is something, it's pretty simple, but it's quite nice to help structure your thinking and your partner's thinking for this twinning proposal. So what I did here was I created a simple sort of triangle figure in Microsoft PowerPoint. And the idea is, and this is kind of on the basis of having a consortium. I think it was Alexander who asked earlier about recommendation, number of partners, advanced partners. And another reason why I guess I recommend it is because you can come up with a simple figure like this. If you start having more sort of twinning partners, it becomes sort of harder to show in a picture. So anyway, with this figure, so you've got the coordinator at the top, and then your advanced twinning partners in the bottom left and bottom right. And in the center, you're saying what your joint research is on. So in the past, when was it? Just over 2.5 years ago, when we were preparing the Helios proposal, we basically had this kind of figure. And it was agreed that the joint research would be on the development of white emitting organic lighting systems. So then the discussion sort of moved to, well, who would be the twinning partners and how do they complement Lviv Polytechnic National University? Not only how they complement in terms of their expertise, but also in terms of their facilities, their laboratory equipment. And then not only that, you see all these arrows going from the corners of the triangle. These are in essence, they're capturing what will be the knowledge exchange, what will be the training provided by one partner to another. Now, the key thing to remember here is, um, yes, this is a project, it's a capacity building, it's about boosting the capability of the coordinator, but then it also needs to be a sort of reciprocal part. You, Lviv Polytechnic National University, you need to have some expertise in this field of research that you want to work with your partners. So what's the knowledge and training that you'll be able to offer to your twinning partners? Yeah. Later on, you'll see an example of this, a completed twinning figure, which was used in the proposal. But just to mention, not only is this a kind of a good tool to use when you're having your discussions with your partners and your early stages of your proposal, but it's also very useful because there's a section and there's a yellow star you see in the right here. It says include such a figure in section 3.2. So section 3.2 is a section in your part B. And yes, this figure is something that you could then include there. So now we move on to about how to structure the overall proposal, what I'm calling the Excellence Implementation Impact Framework. So for those of you who already have experience of Horizon Europe proposals, or perhaps recall the earlier slides I showed, in your Part B, your technical proposal, you have these three sections that get scored. There's excellence, there's impact, and implementation. So this framework I'm going to show is kind of a way of helping to visualize how they all link together. Now, before I show that figure, that framework, let's kind of think a bit more, say some words about these three items. So in the case of excellence, what you're going to need to think about is about breaking down your project's research and innovation strategy into a series of objectives that cover the research and innovation project, that's work package one, but also covers the networking activities, raising research and innovation capacity, strengthening research management capacity, all those things that belongs in the excellence section. The implementation section, on the other hand, is about how you map each of these key objectives to their own specific work package. And then with impacts, you need to be thinking about, well, how do I map the work packages that I've defined and the tasks and the outputs that will come from those? How will they help to contribute to the expected outcomes defined in the work program? So, well, look, this is the sort of figure I've come up with. And if any of you attended my sort of project management online training I did earlier this year in sort of, when it was, I think, February, March, April time, you would have seen a similar kind of figure to this before. This sort of framework figure. Now, what I'm illustrating here is, yes, these three things: excellence, implementation, impact. If I take the first column, so here what I'm saying, here the Commission is asking you to break down your twinning project into a series of objectives. And what I'm strongly recommend here is that you defined 5 objectives. Objective 1 is about conducting state-of-the-art research on whatever your research topic is. Objective 2, I'm saying it should be about transferring knowledge between senior researchers within the consortium, so between Lviv Polytechnic National University and your 2 advanced partners. Then with objective 3, acknowledging and recognizing that these twinning projects are an excellent opportunity for your PhD candidates. Let's have that as a separate objective, which is about providing training to young researchers, not only from Lviv, but also from the twinning partners. Now, objective 4, we were told by the Commission they really wanted to see a work package. They prefer to see a work package or at least some separate tasks for research management capacity building. Okay, let's have an objective 4 dedicated to that. And then objective 5, it says raise the coordinator's research profile. this will be sort of an objective which drives all the dissemination and communication activities that you'll have in your project. So that's all high level. Those are, I'm saying, have these 5 objectives. Now, for each of the objectives, I'm saying, and I'm looking now to the middle column, have each one of them map to their own work package. So objective 1 maps to work package 1, objective 2 to work package 2, and so on and so forth. If you do this, it makes it easier for the evaluator, the people who review your proposal, to understand the structure of your proposal. And then thirdly, impacts. So the Commission, they've already hinted in the call text what kinds of things they're looking for in terms of impact indicators. They mention things like research papers, citations, patents. There's a whole bunch of indicators you can come up with. And obviously each work package will produce various results which can all be monitored and can be indicated. So just the last thing to mention this slide, going to the middle column, if you look at the bottom, it says Work Package 6 Project Management. Now, this is my personal recommendation. I know in a lot of proposals, people put Project Management as Work Package 1. I personally always put it at the end, just so that it doesn't, so that you can have this simple mapping between objectives and work package numbers. Of course, if you put project management as number 1, then you end up having like objective 1 mapped to work package 2, and it becomes a bit more complicated to read. So look, that's some words about your high-level view about this proposal. Let's now move on to talk about the part B, which is the technical part, which is the hardest part of your proposal. So here on this slide, I'm summarizing what are the headings and subheadings in that part B, and I'm also capturing what are the recommended lengths for the different sections. So overall, this part B can have a maximum of 33 pages. Don't go above that. If you do, the Commission's portal will automatically sort of cut off the excess pages, which could contain, in your case, vital information. So make sure you stay within the 33-page limit. Yes, these 33 pages, so they're split between excellence, which has sections 1.1 and objectives. The Commission recommends a length of 2 pages for that. There's a 1.2 coordination and/or support measures and methodology subheading. The Commission recommends 6 pages for that. Moving on to section 2, impacts. So the Commission, you have these 3 subheadings, 2.1, 2.2, 2.3. 2.1, projects pathways towards the impact. The Commission recommend 4 pages. Section 2.2 and 2.3 combined, the Commission is saying that they recommend 5 pages for those 2 combined. For section 3, quality and efficiency of the implementation, there's a subheading 3.1, work plan and resources. The Commission recommends a length of 13 pages, including the tables that they specify that you must use. There's a section 3.2, capacity of participants and consortium as a whole, and the Commission recommend a length of 3 pages. Now, these are all, the Commission doesn't, they offer recommendations. So, of course, you can slightly go over or you can go under these limits, but my personal recommendation is try not to deviate by more than half to 1 page from the recommended limits. And especially, what is very easy to do for partners, scientists, is to write too much in section 3.1. Section 3.1 work plan and resources is where you describe your work packages. And here, it's very easy for scientists to write too much. So you have to be especially careful to write concisely in that section. On the other hand, research and scientists often struggle with writing the impact section. And altogether, this section, the Commission is saying it should be about 9 pages. often they struggle to write 9 pages. And my strong advice is you need to make that, you've got to make that effort. You've got to get at least sort of 4 pages written on project pathways towards impact. If what other tricks can I think to say? Look, 33 pages, there's so much you have to actually get in. It's an effort, normally to squeeze it all in. One thing to bear in mind is the first page of your proposal. It doesn't only have to have the title, yeah? You can already start writing section 1 excellence and section 1.1 objectives on that. So make sure if you're struggling with this page limit, use the front cover as well, yeah? So what I'm going to do now with this part B, I'm not going to talk exhaustively about all the different subsections. Um, or rather, I'm not going to talk exhaustively about all the requirements of what you need to write in those subsections. I'll highlight a few and I'll give you some advice on what I would write or what figure I might use. So starting with section 1 excellence. So we already saw that this section has a 1.1 objectives and a section 1.2 coordination and or support measures and methodology. So in the case of section 1.1, there's various things you have to write about, but one of the things is certainly is about demonstrating how your proposal is pertinent, in other words, relevant to the work program. And in a moment on the next slide, I'll show you how you can do that. In the context of section 1.2, there's various things you need to write about, but then certainly you need to write about why the research is important from a national and EU perspective. I'll illustrate that. I don't think it's written specifically in the core text, but certainly I strongly recommend with these twinning proposals is that you have what's called a SWOT analysis. SWOT stands for strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. And I'll give you an example of that. And then lastly, specify scientific targets for the state-of-the-art research project. So I'll give some advice about that. Anyway, let's start with this section 1.1. So, this is a real example of how to demonstrate the proposal's relevance to the work program. So look, with this table, this is part, I couldn't fit the whole figure in, but this is part of a table that I had in a twinning proposal from a call back in 2021. In fact, it would have been around that time when I was writing the twinning proposal for Albania. Now, to make it a bit more eye-catching, this section, and yeah, eye-catching, but also more concise, the Commission asked, demonstrate how your proposal is relevant to the work program. So I created this table. In the left-hand column, I basically copied and pasted some of the key sentences from the call text. And then in the right-hand column, I said very succinctly, very briefly, oh, how are we addressing this particular requirement? Sometimes because I had so little space, sometimes I'd be just writing the right-hand column, oh, see section 1.2, something like that, yeah? I find it's a good idea in your proposal from time to time to have tables and figures to sort of help break up this 33 pages. If you just have 33 pages of text, it becomes very, very difficult for someone to read. So yeah, so my advice is now and again use tables. In this section 1.2, you're asked to explain why the research is important from a national and EU perspective. So my advice is you should be allocating something like half to 1 page for this. And yes, make sure you describe the relevance and importance on both national and EU level. So if you're talking about national level, certainly in EU countries, unfortunately, I'm not too sure about the situation in Ukraine, but in the EU, you have these things called smart specialization strategies, in brackets S3. These were sort of regional/national strategies that governments, ministries in those countries have developed, where they've they've identified research priorities for funding, and they've linked those priorities also to economic and social needs in those regions or in that country. So if you have a smart specialization strategy, make sure that you point that out, that your project is somehow relevant to that. But also, of course, countries, including Ukraine, no doubt have their own national research innovation strategies, policies. And if you can refer to those or laws, maybe passed by your government, those are good reference points. So that's on a national level. Then on an EU level, what I strongly recommend you do is to go and have a look at what the research and innovation priorities are in Horizon Europe. So depending on your field of research, go back, don't only look at, say, the Horizon Europe work programs for 2026 and 2027, but go back and have a look at the work programs from earlier in the work program, yeah? You may find some matches there between your field of research and past calls. And that's another way of sort of pointing, saying, look, this is a research priority for Europe. Other places you can look at. So within Horizon Europe, or since the start of Horizon Europe, the Commission has helped to establish a series of private-public partnerships, which they call European partnerships. Now, there's a whole series of these in different domains of science and technology. I've only listed, what, 5 or 6 here on this slide, but believe you me, there are many, many more. The examples I give here are processes for planet, clean hydrogen, photonics, high performance computing, One Health, antimicrobial resistance. My advice would be is to go into Google, type in European partnerships, and hopefully one of the first hits you get will be for a website where all these partnerships are listed. Assuming you do that, identify the one or more that is relevant to your field of research, have a look at their websites, have a look to see if they've published their own strategic research agendas and see what they are saying are important research priorities. And if they match your field of research, that's another very good reference point that you need to mention in your proposal. We now move on to SWOT analysis, strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. So these are very, very good things to have in twinning proposals, and indeed in I think many of the calls for under widening, having some sort of SWOT analysis is a good thing to have. So if you're not familiar with these, the way they're structured is, if you look at the left-hand column, so it says strengths and weaknesses of the coordinator. So here what you're doing is, the idea is you look sort of internally at your organization, or specifically your research group, say, and you, as concisely and honestly and candidly, describe what the strengths are and what the weaknesses are. In the right-hand column, where it says opportunities and threats, here the idea is just sort of looking outwards. You're looking outwards at the region where you are, the country you are, and about the opportunities and threats that exist, and how somehow they may provide an opportunity or provide a threat for the area of research you're working in. Now, these SWOT analyses, they're not usually things you can create in 5 minutes, and it's probably something you have to go through several iterations. But it's vital, I think, for twinning that you do it, because later on, what we're going to be doing is, or in your proposal, what you'll need to do is, if you remember those 5 objectives that you're going to have in section 1.1 excellence. So we've got those 5 objectives, which in turn define the work packages. What you'll want to do is you'll want to define a SWOT analysis like this, and then for each of the strengths, each of the weaknesses, and indeed even the opportunities and threats, you somehow use those as justification for the objectives that you've defined in section 1.1. So that's some words about SWOT. reminding ourselves, the Commissioner said up to 30% of your budget can be for a Work Package 1 research component, which is the European Commission's words for saying you can do a research project together with your twinning partners. Now, the key thing here is you can't just, this research project you're going to do with these partners, it has to be state of the art, or rather be, going beyond state of the art. So in the limited space you have in section 1.1, you're going to be describing, underneath your objective one, you'll be describing this research project you're going to work on. You'll probably be writing in some sort of qualitative terms in words, but at some point you need to sort of say, look, we are trying to go to state of the art or beyond state of the art. And this is how we're going to do it in a sort of quantitative manner. So here with this slide here, this is an example. This was from a project all about development of organic electronics. So Irina Yaremchuk and her colleagues will recognize this kind of table. But here, basically, what we've done was we said, well, they were working in their project, they're going to work on thermally activated delayed fluorescence materials, or TADF. And they're going to work on different color emitters. And what we said was, look, these are the types of emitters that we were going to try and develop. Yeah. Now, for an evaluator who has experience in this field, he could come at this and look and go, wow, yeah, they are trying to push the boundary here. That they're not just trying to repeat what's already done. They're trying to go further. So what I'm trying to say here, with perhaps not most clearly or concisely, but whatever your field of science and technology, whatever the focus of the research for your twinning project, see if you can come up with some kind of table where you can capture what it is you're trying to achieve. How in quantitative terms. Okay, we move now from section 1, not to section 2 impact. I deliberately first will go to section 3 implementation because, okay, in the proposals, this part B, it is excellence 1, impact 2, implementation 3. But if we think back to that framework I showed earlier on, and if we think about in terms of chronological order, it somehow makes sense, doesn't it? I mean, you define objectives for your project, you hopefully then implement it, and then if the implementation goes well, you're going to create all these results, outputs, which will generate impacts. So please bear with me. This is why I'm now talking about section 3 before section 2. Anyway, within section 3, there's these section 3.1, which covers work plan and resources. I'm going to say some words of advice about what you might want to include in work package 2 and work package 3, where you're talking about exchanges. I'm going to say a few words of advice about the budget. Then with the section 3.2 capacity of participants and consortium as a whole, I'm going to say, well, we've already talked about twinning network, but I'll show you a real example from a real proposal. And lastly, I'm going to say some words. You're asked by the Commission to show the complementarity with respect to the project's objectives. And I'll show you a simple table how you can sort of demonstrate that. So work package 2 and work package 3. Now, if you hopefully can recall from that framework I showed earlier on, excellence, implementation, impact, I was basically saying objective 2 would be about the networking exchanges of your senior researchers, and objective 3 would be about your early stage, your PhD candidates. Okay, that's fine and good. We need to write work package descriptions for those exchanges. And what I'm showing you here, this is like a concrete example. This was, in this particular proposal, work package 2 was all about the exchange between the coordinating partner and the 2 advanced EU partners. And there was a task 1.1 where the coordinator with one twinning partner exchanges, and then there was a task 2.2 where they were doing exchanges with the other twinning partner. So here, what you see here, this is kind of the text. I should add all the names you see in the table, they're all just being invented. Yeah, I obviously couldn't show you the original names for reasons of confidentiality. I replaced them with uh, sort of typical Ukrainian, typical British names. Yeah, they're just used as examples. What I want to show with this slide is, look, whatever twinning proposal you do, um, whether you're doing a description for a task for the senior researchers or for your younger researchers, make sure you have a table where you have like the names of the researchers who are going to be involved in these exchanges. And say break that table down into years 1, 2, and 3, because I'm assuming you've got a 3-year project. Say some words qualitatively about what's going to be the knowledge exchange, what's going to be the training in year 1 between between the coordinator and that second twinning partner, likewise in year 2, likewise in year 3. And then afterwards, yes, have a table like this where you give a preliminary exchange schedule for your experienced researchers in this case. If you do this, if you have this table with these names, it just sounds more concrete, yeah? On the other hand, of course, when you're doing this kind of description and you're dealing with your young researchers, with PhD candidates, it can be somewhat more complicated because, let's be honest, you don't know necessarily which PhD candidate you're going to have in 2 years' time. If that's the case, try to populate the table as much as possible with real names, real people, but don't be afraid if some of the cells you're putting, instead of a name, you're saying PhD candidate number 1, number 2, on the anticipation that you'll have somebody when the project starts. So move on now to that twinning network. This is something we already talked about. What I'm showing you here is a real example from a real twinning proposal that was called Quest. Now, in this project, there was a coordinator, ELTA. They have 2 advanced EU partners, that's universities, Linköping University and Loughborough University. What you might wonder a bit about is, well, why are there these 2 little things at the top of arrows pointing into ELTA at the top? So in this particular case, my company was also a partner, helping out on the training, helping out on proposal writing, dissemination, IP. We also had a partner just in mind, because this project was very advanced technology development. It was felt that it would be interesting to have an SME, a small to medium-sized enterprise, also in the consortium. This is something that we did specifically in this proposal. If I'm honest, I wouldn't necessarily recommend doing this. I'd keep it as simple as possible, just have 3 consortium partners. Some words about consortium's complementarity with respect to the project's objectives. So right at the very end of your proposal, part B, section 3.2. So the last thing you have there, my recommendation is you have a table. In the left-hand column, you copy and paste in the titles of your different 5 objectives that you defined in section 1.1. And then in the right-hand column, you say very, very concisely, what are the partners' capabilities, contributions, complementarity that exist, that will enable those strategic objectives to be achieved. So if you do something like this, it's quite a nice way to have complete the last page of your part B. Also in this section 3, this is where you'll have to say some words about your budget. I have some recommendations there. If at all you have space, it's quite nice to have some simple pie charts to illustrate the distribution of grant funds between partners or in specific work packages, and or to illustrate the distribution of person months for different work packages. So if you look for a moment at the pie chart on the left, so these examples you see here, this was from a twinning proposal in 2021. In that particular call, we also had this limit where the Commission said work package 1 mustn't be more than 30% of the total budget. But they also, on that occasion, the Commission said, look, the allocation for the coordinator needs to be at least 70%. Fortunately, I mean, that was a bit excessive in 2021. Fortunately, they reduced it down to 50%. But that particular pie chart, because I really wanted to hammer it across that the coordinator has sort of met this 70% example, I created a simple pie chart and I just showed, look, this is what the partners have got in work package 1, and lo and behold, the coordinator, they've got 71%. In other words, we've met this 70% condition. If you're going to do a pie chart like this in your proposals, obviously you'd be looking for sort of 50, 51% or more, yeah? On the right-hand side, the pie chart there, this is about illustrating, yes, the distribution of person months. So as you go around this pie chart, if I look at work package 1, it says work package 1, 94. That's the number of person months allocated for that. And then the 39% means what percentage is that work package of the total person months for the whole project. The things to look out for, so in a twinning proposal, at least the ones I do, work package 6 is the work package for project management. Now, I strongly recommend that whatever number of person months you allocate for that, that it lies somewhere between 5 to 7% of the total number of person months for the whole project. It's never written anywhere in a work program or comes officially from the Commission, but I've seen it from enough evaluations of proposals to know that 5 to 7% is like the sweet spot. If you go below that, you risk being accused of not allocating enough resource for project management. If you go above 7%, you have the risk of being told you've allocated too much resource. So stick between those, 6%, absolutely perfect. Work package 5 here, this is the work package that deals with dissemination and communication. In general, very, very general terms for Horizon Europe proposals, I tell people try to keep to 10% or less. You'll straight away maybe say to me, well, look, but Giles, you've got 11% here. Yes, that's because in the case of twinning projects, you do have a lot of dissemination and communication activities. You can pay for a conference, for example. Now, it's okay to go above 10%, but if you do, make sure you write a few words justifying why there's a relatively high allocation for that. Moving on now to section 2 of impact. So this section has these 3 subsections. Section 2.1, projects pathways towards impact. So the Commission expects you to write about the contribution to the expected outcomes. The expected outcomes are documented in that work program. The Commission wants to hear about how you'll contribute from qualitative and quantitative terms. So I'm going to say in a moment in a slide how you might approach that. You're also expected to write about potential barriers arising from factors beyond the scope and duration of the project. So in a moment, I'm going to say some words about how you might approach that. In this section 2.2, dissemination, exploitation and communication, you're expected to present a dissemination communication plan. So I'm going to show you an example of one of those. You're also expected to write about the strategy for the management of intellectual property. So I'm going to say some words about how you can approach that. And then lastly is section 2.3 summary, summary impact pathways. I'm going to show you a real example. For that sort of section, the Commission in the standard application form, the Commission provides these 2 tables. When you see in the standard application form, these tables look rather large. I kind of found a way to sort of make it more condensed and to link the 2 tables better together, which was especially important with a proposal of 33 pages. So what I'm going to do is I'll show you a real example of what I did for that. Anyway, let's start with section 2.1. So, yeah, qualitative contribution to expected outcomes. Right, on this slide, these 5 outcomes, all these points I've literally copied and pasted from the call text for twinning in the Widening 2026-2027 work program. So the Commission has told us this is the expected outcomes we're meant to achieve. Okay, great. So I copied each of them, and now what I'm saying is, look, you might recall earlier on I said, look, impact section is the hardest part usually for scientists to write. I really urge you for this section, make sure you write 2 pages in a narrative style. So for each of these outcomes, really think to yourself about what are the 5 objectives I've got in my project? What are the 5 or 6 work packages I've got? What's going on? What can I reasonably justify saying this will help to generate this outcome? So go through each of those outcomes, all 5, and do your best to produce something like 2 pages of text in a narrative style. That's on the qualitative side. The Commission also says, look, how are you going to help to achieve these expected outcomes in quantitative terms? So here again, I'm back to one of my tables with a simple table here. On the left-hand side, that column, I've copied and pasted each of the different outcomes. I'm afraid that I haven't got this table. I don't show all 5, but obviously the idea would be that you have all 5 rows. I've then had a column saying which work packages, some way or other, the tasks I'm doing, the activities I'm doing, how are they somehow contributing to that? And then I've sort of brainstormed for different performance indicators. It might be things like how many researchers are being trained, senior ones, junior ones, how many summer schools I'm running, how many joint research papers, and. Now, the thing with these indicators is, being completely honest with you, these expected outcomes from the Commission, there's 5 of them. To some extent, they overlap. So, in a way, it's no surprise then when you look at the performance indicators that we have defined, some of them are appearing against more than one expected outcome. Yeah. Don't be afraid of that. So, still in this section 2.1, the Commission asks and requires us to write something about potential barriers arising from factors beyond the scope and duration of the project. And my advice here is to think in terms of 2 categories of barriers. Firstly, think about scientific related ones. So whatever your research project you're doing in work package 1, whatever the research focus is with your partners, your advanced twinning partners, try to define, together with them, 3 to 4 challenges, barriers specific to that research topic. And if you're struggling amongst yourselves to come up with those, then earlier on I was talking about these European partnerships, these public-private partnerships. You might want to go and have an investigate, find the 1 or 2 that are most relevant to your research topic, and see what, especially if you can find a strategic research agenda document from them. Buried in those, you'll find some information about what they are saying are challenges and barriers in that particular scientific technological field. So capture 3 or 4 challenges. That's on the scientific level. But then on the country level, Ukraine, whether it's Ukraine or Albania or Portugal, wherever, all countries in some way or other, they have issues, barriers, challenges that their country's research and innovation systems are facing. What you need to do is sort of go and find out, see if there's some kind of national strategy, or maybe there's something called an era watch country report for your country. Try to find some sort of official documents to talk about defining the research and innovation policies, priorities for your country or your region, and see if within those documents they also talk about certain barriers, certain challenges, which you can then reference in your twinning proposal. But here's the thing, whether it's scientific or country related barriers, not only are you required to say, define those, capture those, and reference them, but you also need to think about some sort of mitigation measures, some ways that some things that your project can do to help to reduce that risk, or if that risk emerges, how to adapt your project. Okay. Move on to talk about dissemination and communication plan. So all Horizon Europe projects, be it twinning or from say pillar 2 or pillar 1, you all have to have these dissemination communication plans. So again, as I've said before, I quite like my tables. This is a classic sort of type of table I've had. This was one I had in a twinning proposal a few years ago. I haven't showed quite all the table because I couldn't quite fit in the slide, but you probably see 3/4 of the table. Here's some ideas of dissemination and communication activities and target audiences that you might think about, and about indicators and targets for those different results. Also in this section 2.2 within impact, the Commission says that they want you to write about a strategy for the management of intellectual property. So intellectual property for the vast majority of you would be patents or knowledge that is potentially patentable. Now, if you're talking about knowledge in the context of science projects, people talk about background knowledge and foreground knowledge. So background knowledge is knowledge which you and your partners already have in the scientific field and which you're going to bring to bear on doing your research project in Work Package 1. That's the background knowledge. But of course, in the process of doing your research project in Work Package 1, you'll hopefully be learning, you'll be creating new results, learning new information, and this is what they call foreground knowledge. This is the new knowledge that you generate. This is the knowledge which maybe it will lead to patents. Certainly, this is the intellectual property, if you like, of the project. So my advice here is, and again, it depends on the space you have. If you have enough space, come up with a table showing the background knowledge, i.e. the knowledge that the partners each have, which is complementary at the start, before the project starts. Include that table if you have the space. But at the very least, very least, make sure you have a table where you identify the possible foreground knowledge. So here what you'll need to do is create a simple table like that, and then ask each of your partners, look, if we succeed in doing this Work Package 1 research project, what do you think the results will be? What do you think will be the knowledge, the new knowledge that you have? Please write it very succinctly, concisely in this table. And if you do that, and then write some words about how ownership will be defined and shared between partners. If you do that, then you will cover this well within your proposal. The last thing to say in this impact section. So we have this section 2.3, summary impact pathways. In this slide, I'm showing you a real example from a real proposal, a real twinning proposal. This was one with ELTA in Budapest. So what you see with this, in actual fact, with this sort of table, you can just see that there's like a top half where in a sort of lightish pinkish color, the headings say specific needs, expected results, and then D and E and C, it stands for dissemination, exploitation, and communication measures. That top half, that's all one table. Well, it's a blank table that you have in the standard application form from the Commission. Similarly, in the lower half, where you've got these titles with a light yellow background where it says sort of target groups, outcomes, impacts, this is a second table that the Commission requests you to fill out and include in the proposal. Now, with these tables that the Commission provides, if I'm honest, to me it seems rather abstract what they're requesting. And I had to spend quite a bit of time scratching my head trying to figure out, well, what on earth do I actually put in these tables? So this is what I did with the twinning proposal with Elta. Um, in terms of specific needs, I said, well, look, we did the SWOT analysis for Elta with the threats and weaknesses and so forth. That's driving the needs for this project. Yeah, that's helping us to define our objectives and our work packages. So, okay, let's say the specific needs we're addressing with the project. In summary, it's the SWOT analysis for Elta. But then I said, oh, well, wait a minute. In the case of Elta, the research topic is about quantum reservoir computing. It's a very advanced field of research, but this is an example of quantum technologies. And when I went away and was sort of looking up about European partnerships, I came across that the EU has a strategic research agenda on quantum technologies. So I sort of said, well, look, wait a minute. This twinning project is not only addressing the SWOT analysis need of ELTA. The EU are saying that we need to develop quantum technologies, so we're going to help to address that specific need. So that's what I wrote there. Those two things then basically drove what you see in the following column. So where it said expected results, I had a whole series of key performance indicators for the objectives. I didn't have the space in this table to repeat them, so I just said, look, go away and look at section 1.1. It's all there. Dissemination, exploitation, and communication measures. Okay, I did already have a dissemination and communication plan, but I thought, well, I've got enough space here to write very, very succinctly some words there. So that's what I wrote. Then where it's in the bottom left-hand corner where it says target groups, these are all target groups, in fact, that had already been defined elsewhere in the proposal, but again, I wrote them very, very succinctly. Where it said outcomes, so yeah, expected outcomes. This is part of the impact section. We defined in qualitative terms and quantitative terms already in the section 2.1.2. I didn't have the space here to sort of repeat all that, so I just said, look, go away and look at that section. That's where it is. And then the last bottom right-hand corner, impacts. So my thinking was I found a reference to the Horizon Europe Widening destination, improved access to access to excellence. So I basically kind of repeated back to the Commission what I thought they would want to hear there for the impact. But I also noted, look, this field of research, quantum reservoir computing, it's part of quantum technologies. Where does that also fit in Horizon Europe? Well, it turns out it's under something called Cluster 4 Destination, Digital and Emerging Technologies, blah, blah, blah. So I made a reference there. So whatever your twinning proposal, whatever the topics, this this kind of table, this is something that maybe you can adapt for your own purposes. Yeah. Okay, I've done part B, I think, to death. Let's say some words about part A, the administrative data and descriptors. So the part A of the proposal, this is all you have to fill in online, this information, this data. So you're going to have to provide details about the core topic, the acronym for your proposal, title and duration. So make sure they are correctly encoded online. You're going to be required to indicate scientific descriptors for your proposal, and you have to pick from lists. And obviously, pick the ones that it won't be one, it'll probably be 3 or 4 such scientific descriptors, but make sure you do your best to check the ones that correspond as best as possible with your proposal, because these scientific descriptors influence they basically enable the Commission to decide which evaluators they need to evaluate your proposal. Also in this part A, you're going to have to put in data about your partners. You'll need to know all the names of their researchers that be involved in the projects, what their ORCID numbers are, what their email addresses are. You'll need to know what the participant identification codes, the PIC numbers are for your partners, the legal status is up to date in the portal. Whatever you're putting in the part A, obviously it needs to be consistent with your part B and the consortium narrative. So, for example, somewhere in your part A, I believe you have to put in sort of acronyms for your partners, or partners organizations, make sure they're consistent with your proposal. Amongst the part A, you're going to have to need to write a concise abstract of around 200 words. My advice here is make sure in that short abstract that you mention what the overall goal is to boost the scientific prowess and innovative capabilities of your organization in whatever research topic. In the abstract, you should mention your excellent twinning partners, what the project's key objectives are, and what the project's expected impacts are. Below the abstract, I believe, is where you have a chance to put in some free keywords that describe the field of science. Obviously, choose ones which are maybe slightly different to the scientific descriptors that you select from the menu. Make sure this abstract is well written, get it proofread, run it through, I don't know, chat GPT or whatever. Make sure the English is absolutely, perfect, because 9 times out of 10, this is the first thing that the evaluator will read. So you want to make sure that it's something that's easy to read and appealing. Yeah. Okay, some words about budget, lump sum funding. In a way, I apologize. I'm going to slightly duck this issue, this question, because it does require quite a bit of time to do. My advice is, if you've not, well, firstly, for those of you who attended my project management course online back early this year, and those of you who did the homeworks, one of the homeworks was all about producing a lump sum budget using this Excel file. If you're now also thinking about doing a twinning proposal, I strongly recommend you go back and look at your homeworks to refresh your memories, yeah, and the slides that I produced for that. For those of you who've not encountered lump sum funding before, look, there's a very good European Commission website. The QR code will take you to that. Part of the screenshot you see here, this is from the landing page for that website. On that website from the Commission, you can find there's training videos, there's training presentations, and also you can download a version of the Excel budget tool. But as I mentioned already earlier on, be very, very careful. Make sure once the call's open on the 8th of January, you register for the call and you download the Excel budget tool from the portal from your registration. Yeah. That way you can be sure you're using the latest and the correct version for the call. Still some words about lump sum budget. Yeah, make sure, I'm repeating what I said already, make sure to download the Excel budget tool provided for the Horizon Europe call that you're applying to. This Excel file budget tool, once you have prepared it, for your proposal. And in preparing it, you'll have to give the budget for each of the partners for each of their work packages. And it'll be broken down into things like personnel costs, travel costs, research consumable costs, and so forth. Once you've prepared that budget, reviewed it with your partners, everyone's happy, or more or less happy, you're going to be uploading that final version to the European Commission's portal. And this will form part of your proposal application. Still, a last slide in regard to lump sum funding. So in almost certainly with your twinning proposal and with Horizon Europe proposals in general, by far and away, the largest budget, the largest component of your budget will probably go to personnel costs. So it's important to know when you're looking at your own, the person month rates you use for your own institution, but also when you're looking at the person month rates that your partners are saying they want to use. It's good to know how those amounts correspond with similar organizations from the same country. Now, what the Commission has done is they've created a web page, actually not first and foremost for applicants like yourselves, like myself, but for evaluators of such proposals, because the evaluators of your printing proposals, they'll also look at your budgets and how much you have allocated for personnel costs. And they also need to know, oh, does that sound reasonable or not? So the Commission have created this Horizon dashboard. The QR code will take you there. The figure on the right is sort of an example from there. Basically, within this dashboard, this website, you can specify the country from which the yourselves or your partners is located, and you can specify, oh, are they a university or public research institution or private large company or private small to medium-sized enterprise. You can specify that, put that in, and then this dashboard will automatically look at all the past proposals involving such organizations and tell you what were the 20th, 50th, and 80th percentile figures for personnel costs. So the trick here is to say to yourself, well, look, if your personnel month rates for your organization are within the 20th or the 80th percentile for Ukraine, for a university, then all fine and good. But even if you are, and you could well have cases, especially with some universities, I don't know, like Finland, maybe Sweden, or certain public research institutions in expensive countries where the person month rates they're quoting, they're above the 80th percentile. Now, if you have a situation like that, it's not a disaster. You don't need necessarily to go back to them and say, hey, bring that figure down. But what you do need to do is you do need to write a short justification of why their average person month rate is above the 80th percentile. And a reason might be because that partner is mainly involving very senior researchers in the project who naturally have higher personnel costs. Whatever, but these things to be aware of, yeah? Part A, last few slides. So part A, you also need to write some words about, or you need to fill in some tables about ethics and security. So complete those self-assessments carefully, addressing any issues raised in your activities. This is usually things if you're dealing with medical, healthcare, are classic ones. Cybersecurity would be another kind of classic one where you will probably flag some issues that you need to explain in more detail. Yeah, explain how you manage personal data, dual use concerns, or safety related experiments. Okay. Okay, we finally moved away from talking about the part A and part B. This very last few slides now, my training presentation, I just want to say something about other sources of information about this twinning call. So the first and most important is to say, look, the Commission on the 22nd of January next year, they're going to have an online info day about widening calls. And in particular, they're going to be talking about this twinning call during that presentation. Now, the presentation is online, it's free, but you do need to register beforehand. So if you go to that QR code, you can go ahead and register for that. My advice would be if you can listen in real time. If not, the Commission will probably publish the video on YouTube a few days later. So that's the one that's coming up now. The Commission 2.5 years ago when they had the last twinning call, they had a similar thing with an info day online. What I'm just showing you here was the video that they produced for that. The QR code will take you to that. If you're feeling very keen, you might want to go and listen to that. The twinning call from 2023 was not so different to the one we had now. Maybe there's some little bits of information that you can glean from that. Other sources of information worth looking at. So this call in 2026 is not the first twinning call. It's probably be about the fourth one, I would guess, we've had in Horizon Europe. My advice would be to sort of have a bit of a look at the past calls on the European Commission's portal. With all the calls, and indeed it'll also be for this latest one once it's open on the 8th of January. There's a section where it says topic related FAQs, frequently asked questions. So it's worth going and having to investigate what sort of questions, because often the questions that you may have, other proposal writers have had the same ones, and you can gain quite an insight from these sections. So look at the FAQs from past calls. Look at the FAQ that will be established for this latest call. Right at the beginning of this presentation, I showed a slide with 2 example twinnings, and then I had like 3 QR codes saying that this is where you can find the list. Another way you can draw up those project lists is through the portal, find the call from 2021 or 2023, and click on where it says funded project list, and that's another way in which you can get that information. And then lastly, my advice about other sources of information. So there is a thing called NCP, which stands for National Contact Point, ncpwideera.net. This is the website address, www.ncpwideera.net. So this is a network of national contact points for the Horizon Europe widening program. This network has existed for, well, basically, I think since the start of Horizon Europe, so probably 4 or 5 years. What's really good about this network of national contact points is they're really there to provide these NCPs, they're really there to provide support in each of their different countries to universities like yourselves about the widening program. And with this particular network, what's nice is they publish regularly, once every month or every 2 months, a free e-newsletter where they provide a lot of useful background information about widening calls, including twinning. Or some months after the call is closed and the results have been announced, they publish some statistics. On the right-hand side, you see the figures from the call that we had in 2021. You see how many were submitted from different countries and how many were successful. But lastly, and perhaps arguably the most valuable thing about this network is they also provide free expert pre-screening facility for Horizon Europe proposals, including twinning. So in other words, you can prepare, if you're working on a twinning proposal, you can get in contact with this network and you can get their experts to review for free your proposal. And they'll give you candid, honest feedback about where it's weak and where it can be improved. So it's a lot of information there. I hope I haven't bored you too much with that or overwhelmed you too much. And now come to my last slide. And I said right at the beginning of the training presentation that Nazari, Irene, and myself, we're going to be running an internal competition to select LPNU coordinated twinning proposals for hands-on support from myself. Now, this is totally optional. There's absolutely no obligation, but if you are seriously interested in preparing a twinning proposal and you would like free, I stress free support from myself, free advice, um, then please do the following because we're willing to give free hands-on support for up to three proposals coordinated by Lviv Polytechnic National University. Now, if you're interested, you should send an email to Nazari. This is his email address. And what you need to send in that email is your project charter. So the project charter is like a 1 to 2 page sort of summary abstract. And you need to do this the latest by 5 o'clock Brussels time on the 8th of January. And in your project charter, you need to capture the following. So firstly, a section 1 scientific topic. You need to provide a summary of what your research project would be for Work Package 1 research component. You need to show that your research project is state of the art, as demonstrated by your institution's recent publications in journals or presentations in conferences. You need to show that your research project is relevant to EU research policy priorities. So, for example, look at current or recent calls in Horizon Europe, look at those European partnerships, show where the links are, where the relevance is, and mention that in your project charter. Then with your consortium, what we're really looking for is that you're able to say, look, these are the two or more twinning partners that I'd like to work with, and demonstrate how they're high quality. So do they have some recent publications in the scientific topic? What's their complementarity with your institution? Do you have some sort of evidence of past existing collaboration with your institution? Yeah. And then thirdly, the impact section in this project charter, say some words about how concretely your twinning project could enhance the research and management capacities of your institution and show how your twinning project is relevant to maybe EU societal, environmental, and or economic policy priorities. So think for a moment, going way back at the start of my training presentation, I talked about policy context and I talked about those three policy documents. See if you can identify some links, some relevance between your project and those, and that would be perfect, yeah. So yes, so if you're interested, send your project charter up to 2 pages before 5 o'clock on the 8th of January to Nazari. Nazari, Irene, and myself, and maybe one or two others will review those, and then we will announce the winners by the 14th of January. So, dear colleagues, hope you're still there. You haven't all gone offline. We have our final Q&A session.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for the presentation. And referring to Irina, this is our Vice Rector, Irina Yaremchuk. So she is a coordinator of this Helios project. So there will be internal competition for us to have it. So this was just some addition. Yeah, so if you have a question, yes, please ask your questions. So meanwhile, there is, I think, the question from our youngest generation. Could you share at least one successful example of such documents? So probably this is referring to the proposal.
Okay, short answer is no, I can't like just release a whole successful proposal for I have to respect the scientific content uh, of the proposals. Although I have helped write work packages about exchanges and about impacts and all this kind of stuff, if you like, the copyright about the scientific part doesn't really belong to me, so I can't provide a whole proposal. What I can say is for those up to three that we select, there will be more resources made available. Yeah, more texts, examples of text from successful proposals, more advice. There's so so no, I can't provide a whole proposal, but I can provide more resources for the lucky three. Yeah.
Yes, This is our policy, also internal
Yeah.
policy in our project office. So we don't share successful
Yeah.
templates, but we can provide you additional individual consultation. So
Yeah.
sometimes it's even more valuable. At least in my case, ask someone for the advice how to improve your proposal. Yes, I signed NDA. No, not that time. Okay, so yeah, okay, so maybe we'll, if no questions, if you have a question, please,
Okay.
you can type it in the chat, or you can say it
My
loud.
advice, Alexander, prepare an amazing project charter, which um, when Nazari, Irina, and I come to look at, we just think, wow, this is amazing. Yes, this is one that definitely deserves hands-on support. Yeah.
Great. If no questions, if you are still with us, yes, Alexander,
Yeah, I
maybe
still
quick
have a question.
question.
Sorry, maybe you will not see me because I have a really poor broadcast. So the question is, why in most cases the organizers didn't send some kind of more wider feedback? They just, for example, reject and that's all. This is kind of tricky stuff because really I have fulfilled few such a competition, and I haven't got any constructive feedback to improve my project. So could you explain why is such mystery around such possibilities?
Can I answer? Yes and no is the honest answer. I mean, all these years, 20, 25 years, I've been writing proposals and tenders. Um, I've always been on the writing side, the submitting side. I've never been an evaluator. I never wanted to be. So I don't know exactly their perspective. But what I can say is sometimes, I'm talking very general terms. Of course, with those evaluation summary reports you get, what you've got to bear in mind is there's been like 3 or 4 evaluators for the proposal, and then one of them has appointed a rapporteur, and she or he has a job of like extracting some of the comments, positive and negative, and throwing them into this summary report. And that's why sometimes you get, frankly speaking, sometimes quite contradictory remarks for the same section. That can be very frustrating. Uh, the other thing is because of the strange language, frankly, used in some of these proposals and the way the Commission speaks and writes these call texts, um, sometimes some need to have this sort of inside knowledge, background knowledge about the call. So when you get this negative comment, you're really able to interpret it. It may not be very clear English. Yeah, I mean, from what you're talking, Alexander, was this a past twinning proposal that you did that you got this negative feedback? Well,
The problem is that I haven't got any feedback at all. It's like rejection, and yeah, you was just not selected.
oh, wait
What
a
type
minute.
what type of program? Did,
Yes.
did you apply for Horizon? Because Horizon projects typically has a very,
Yeah.
very well written description why you were rejected. And the more you actually practice and receive the feedback, the more you can improve your proposal.
Okay. So in this case, I am super glad that Horizon has such possibility because it was Go Tech and Deep Tech, and it was not Horizon, and I was a bit
Oh,
upset, and even
okay.
uh, thought to just give up to take participant in any other stuff. But that in this case, it's super awesome. Thank you.
Okay. I mean, just to reinforce what Nazari said, with all Horizon Europe calls, um, all proposals that get submitted that are eligible and get submitted, they all get what's called an evaluation summary report. And this is a document which is typically 2 to 3 pages in length. And it's structured it's like what I said in my slide earlier on about the evaluation for twinning, that there's three sections. There's the excellence, impact, and implementation, and each of those is scored out of 5. Now, in this evaluation summary report, you'll see what the score is for each of those sections, but then there'll be a whole load of text where the evaluators have written comments, and maybe positive comments and maybe negative comments, but it will be all kind of captured in there. So in general terms, you do get feedback at times, especially when it's negative comments, and if you haven't been funded, you can go at times you have an emotional reaction at the beginning, and it's you think, how could they possibly write that? It's rubbish. Maybe it's only days or weeks later when you calm down, or at least in my case, I've calmed down and I come back and I go, actually, yeah, I guess they had a valid point, and I need to improve that. Yeah, but you do get feedback. Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much.
Okay, any other questions, colleagues? No, crystal clear.